Why weren't the rulers of the Roman Empire able to falsify the resurrection of Jesus? It surely wasn't for a lack of effort, because Eusebius records in his histories that forged memoranda of Pilate and Jesus were published under Emperor Maximin II around 311 AD, and sent to every district under his command. He announced in edicts that they were to be publicly displayed, and should be given to the school children by their teachers instead of lessons to study. As emperor, why would Maximin need to publish a forged memoranda of Pilate when he would have had access to the official records of the empire? According to Cicero, the prefect of Judea was obligated to deposit 2 copies of his account in the 2 chief cities of his province, and place one in the archives of the Aqua Reuni. Justin Martyr in 150 AD appeals for the release of these acts in his published defense of Christianity to the Emperor Ananias, which he believed would substantiate the Gospel's account, affirming, "These things did happen, as you can ascertain from the Acts of Pontius Pilate." The response Justin received was not the publication of the official records refuting his claims, but martyrdom. It's interesting that Tacitus, one of the greatest historians of the Roman Empire, who wrote specifically on the period in question, referring to the extreme penalty Jesus suffered at the hands of Pilate, and the early Christians in Rome, did not provide a historiographic narrative falsifying the resurrection event. In a similar fashion, Josephus's Histories provides valuable insight into 1st century Judaism, background of early Christianity, and an account of Jesus' brother James. Yet no tome refuting a resurrection hoax, even though such a tome would have served Josephus well at the court of the Flavian emperors. Remember that years prior, according to the published Acts of the Apostles, the Apostle Paul defended the Gospel account as he stood before Festus, the prefect of Judea, and Agrippa, the king of Galilee, the area where Jesus grew up, and the events surrounding his ministry mainly occurred. For when Festus accused Paul of being beside himself and claimed that too much learning had made Paul mad, Paul responded to Festus by stating, "I speak forth the words of truth and soberness, for the king knoweth of these things, before whom also I speak freely. For I am persuaded that none of these things are hidden from him, for this thing was not done in a corner." Several key points are established here in Paul's statement. First, as king, Agrippa was well aware of the events that transpired in his kingdom, and could have easily refuted what Paul was saying, if a naturalistic explanation for the resurrection of Jesus was available that could have then been published against the Christians and copied throughout the empire. Secondly, Festus, the prefect of Judea, had access to the official records in Judea that could have been used against Paul, if information was available to falsify the resurrection account from Pilate's memoranda. Lastly, Paul demonstrates that the account of Jesus' resurrection provides falsifiable criteria that is subject to a proper investigation by the rulers of the Roman Empire to uncover. And it's this falsifiable event, i.e. the resurrection, that marks the distinction with Christianity as opposed to other religions like Islam and Buddhism. Unless the NSA has video surveillance of Muhammad's conversation with the angel Gabriel from the 7th century, or we can download the satellite images of the monkey that threw down the fruit of the bo tree onto Buddha's head that caused him to see the light, we don't have standard criterion to falsify those inner experiences. This is why we have Karl Popper's criterion of falsifiability, so we can evaluate the inherent testability of any hypothesis or statement. A hypothesis is genuinely scientific only if it is possible in principle to establish that it is false. Therefore, let's be scientific in our approach, and follow in the footsteps of the amazing Randy, whose dealings with the supernatural claims of the psychic community wasn't just an array of allegations that they were fake, and that he didn't believe it. Instead, he felt the need to demonstrate under scientific, testable conditions how it was done. By putting Karl Popper's maxim into practice, James Randi was able to achieve similar results to those of the psychic community through naturalistic means, thereby falsifying their supernatural claims. Therefore, in Christianity, all that is needed to falsify the resurrection of Jesus is to either A. Produce the body, B. Provide a credible tome from the ancient world with a naturalistic explanation of what had happened. Or C. Uncover the true identities of the Gospel authors if they weren't the disciples of Jesus, and expose their myth regardless of when the documents were published. Are we suggesting that these assignments were not well within the means of the Roman rulers to investigate and uncover? For I am aware of the a priori assertion that Jesus picked a time and a process that cannot be properly subject to investigation. Shouldn't we first understand how the Romans conducted investigations of religious cults before drawing that conclusion? Fortunately for us, the Roman historian Livy, who wrote the histories of Rome up until the glorious reign of Caesar Augustus, chronicles how the Romans investigated the religious cult of the Bacchus, which can be used as a base indicator of how Romans conducted investigations against other religious cults, like Christianity. Remember that during the time of the Republic and the Empire, Rome operated as a well-organized police state, and as such, Levi reported that the Romans were monitoring the religious cult Bacchus closely, and gathering intelligence from witnesses on their activities. Now, pay close attention as it provides clarity and insight into the thorough, serious, and careful nature of their investigative process. First, a high official is used, the council in this case, to conduct the interrogation of a former cult member to corroborate against intelligence the council had received. Second, Levi informs us that the witness Hispella was summoned to appear and nearly fainted when she saw the lictors in the vestibule, the consul's entourage, and the consul himself. Levi further reports the council informed the witness that if she could bring herself to tell him the facts, she had no cause for alarm, and she should reveal to them the ceremonies that were habitually performed in the nocturnal rites of the Bacchanalia. Upon hearing this from the council, the woman was panic-stricken, and such trembling seized every part of her body that for a long time she could not open her mouth. Even after her full confession, Levi tells us that the council went on to warn her that if she were to be proved to be lying by the evidence of another witness, she could not expect the same forgiveness or indulgence as she would receive if she made a voluntary confession. He added that the man who had heard the story from her had given him a full account of the facts. The significance of Levi's details on Rome's investigation of the Baculi cannot be overstated. There isn't anything in Levi's account which leaves us with any doubt that the Council of Rome was not going to gather the intelligence he needed from this witness, or others, to expose the conspiracy of the Baculi, for that was the power of Rome. The parallels of this case to Rome's investigation of another religious cult, Christianity, is clear. Rome is again entrusting the gathering of evidence to high Roman officials, in fact, those seated at the court of the emperor, to expose the movement of Christianity. This is why prefects such as Paulinius, Felix, Festus, and Pilate were interrogating Paul and Jesus. The empire was very concerned about insurrection. Felix, according to Josephus, had suppressed the messianic movement of the Egyptian prophet and ordered the assignation of the high priest Jonathan. So, it comes as no surprise why the prefect Felix interrogated Paul on two separate occasions. Hegesippus chronicles that the Emperor Domitian dreaded the advent of Christ as Herod had, and had his spies locate the grandsons of Jude, who were the family of Jesus, in order to interrogate them. The same modus operandi is evidenced in Levi's investigation of the Baculi. Remember, in each and every one of these interrogations, the witness could have turned over to torture, or put to death at any time. Recall, this is why Hispella reeked of fear at the sight of the council. Pilate emphasized this reality to Jesus when he said, "Do you know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" Pliny had established procedures for interrogating Christians, and judged it necessary to find out what the truth was by torturing two female Christian deaconesses in his letter to Trajan. All that was needed to falsify the resurrection was just one credible witness, whose testimony could be corroborated if it was a hoax, all within the means of the Roman Empire to uncover. Yet despite all this immense power and endless amount of resources, the rulers of the Roman Empire failed to produce a credible tome that the resurrection or the Gospels were a hoax in its investigation of Christianity. For when we turn to the positive empirical evidence, we find throughout the Roman Empire, in all the apostolic churches, the same 4 Gospels, in Aramaic, Greek, Coptic, and Vetus Latin, naming the same 4 authors of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, unlike the Gnostics who had different Gospels naming different authors. To paraphrase John Chrysostom, if there be 4 that write, not at the same times, nor in the same places, neither after having met together and conversed one with another, and then they speak all the same things, as if it were out of one mouth, this becomes a very great demonstration of the truth. But the contrary, it may be said, has come to pass, for in many places they disagree. Or rather, this very thing is a very great evidence of their truth. For if they had agreed in all things exactly even to time and place, and to the very words, it would be evidence of collusion. In any normal court of law, independent witnesses that basically agree that have not colluded on their testimony would be conclusive in any normal court of law. As I said, we do know that throughout the Roman Empire, conversations to Christianity were occurring all over the place. It is obvious the Roman Empire had found the truth. That is, the gospel truth.